Hi, and welcome to this month's episode of Healthy Living Resources. I'm Amanda Woods, Healthy Finances Program Specialist, and this month we're going to be talking about Prosper, so stay tuned. Welcome to this month's episode of Healthy Living Resources. I'm Amanda Woods, Healthy Finances Program Specialist with OSU Extension, Family and Consumer Sciences. And this month we're going to be joined by Karima Samadi and Gabrielle, who are here to discuss Prosper with us. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
So before we jump into the real meat of today, why don't you both take a little time and just give us some information about who you are and where you're coming from.
Sure. Okay. Well, I have been with Extension for about almost a little over 7 years now. I got my start as an FNEP program assistant, so I was teaching limited resource families how to make healthy meals on a budget. During that time, I went back to school and earned my master's in public health degree, which helped me leverage my work working with food insecure families into research. And I worked on a project called Heal Maps, which was participatory mapping, and then that really got me interested in more community-based work, which led me to Prosper. So that's sort of my backstory with Extension and how I got to where I am now.
Great. Cool. What about you, Gabby?
So I also studied public health at Ohio State. I have a lot of experience working in international settings in public health, primarily women's health. And prior to my role with Prosper, I was working for a reproductive health organization, teaching young women about reproductive health in Columbus.
Great. Well, welcome again. So Prosper, what is that? Give us a little bit of information.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah.
So Prosper is a delivery system that uses evidence-based curricula and targets middle school students and their families. It has been around for over 20 years. It has a ton of evidence to support it. It's kind of housed by Iowa State University and has been done in rural settings. So Ohio is really excited to implement Prosper as one of the many efforts happening right now in response to the opioid epidemic. And Ohio State is implementing the program in 10 counties across the state, which we'll get into a little bit later. Karima is familiar with some of the rural projects, and then I'm working on the project in Franklin County. So we are implementing the Prosper delivery system in an urban setting for the first time. So we're really excited to see how it will roll out in an urban setting and see what kind of differences or changes might occur.
And like a lot of things in our line of work, Prosper is an acronym. So it stands for Promoting School Community University Partnerships to Enhance Resilience.
Okay.
So we'll get into the nitty-gritty into what that exactly means and what it means to enhance resilience. But Gabby mentioned the urban component, and then I work with some rural programs. So we're actually in 9 counties throughout the state. The 3 that I work with are Paulding, Hardin, and Vinton. And then we have 2 other prevention coordinators actually that weren't able to join us today, but that also represent the remaining 6 counties, and those are Pike, Brown, and Greene, and Monroe, Perry, and Washington.
Okay.
So as you know, Extension is a resource to helping keep families healthy, and is really the backbone to social capital in rural communities. And so we work in partnership with drug task force and coalitions, health departments, schools. They tend to sit on our community teams, which we'll get into. So it's a really community-based approach that's really rooted on our land grant mission at Ohio State University to provide outreach and engagement in the community.
Great. So this is a prevention approach. Why is prevention so important when it comes to responding to the opioid epidemic?
So like I said, Karima and I both studied public health, so we are big public health people. We're very passionate about prevention. That's why we do what we do. Like I said, there's a lot happening right now in the substance abuse prevention field across the state, and I'm sure many people have heard of some of the programs that have been happening, like with Narcan and naloxone in response to opioid overdoses. There's a lot of treatment programs, but what we know is that prevention is a huge piece of that puzzle and is going to be one of the key aspects in fighting this epidemic.
Right.
So Karima and I are really, like I said, both very passionate about this kind of multi-pronged approach and working on the prevention side of things.
And like we said, extension especially plays a unique role in that sustainability component. So when we talk about prevention work, it's not just about a one and done. It's about really rooting yourself in a healthy community. What does it mean to deliver the education, the evidence-based programming? What does it mean to sustain a coalition? So we really are excited to work with Extension in not only the short-term but also long-term impacts.
Right.
Because we'll talk a little bit about it later, but Prosper has been one of the few substance abuse prevention programs that's been proven over a long period of time, over 20 years in about 10 different states, to be effective in reducing substance use and promoting healthy behavior with youth and families.
And like I mentioned before, Prosper programs are targeted towards middle school students.
Okay.
And so one of the things that we know is that unfortunately, the earlier that someone starts using substances, the more likely they are to develop a substance use disorder in the future. And so that's why it's really important to begin these types of programs at such a young age. So we're working with 6th and 7th grade students, and some key elements of the program are encouraging young people to develop coping skills, healthy communication techniques to combat peer pressure, and some of that resiliency that we know is shown to reduce substance use over time.
That's great. So you mentioned the projects across the state in these different counties. Do these projects look different from county to county? Is the approach the same across the state? Can you speak a little bit?
That's a good question. So we're trying to, because this is our first time implementing in Ohio. Now, normally when states do Prosper, they maybe engage, a couple communities, 3 at most. But Ohio really took it on with 10 counties. So because it's our first time implementing, we really want to really launch the program with what we call fidelity. That means by the book. Gotcha. So sticking to the 3 core components, which are the family-based program, the school-based program, and the community team. Okay. So with the school-based program, it's called Strengthening Families Program 10 to 14, and like Gabby mentioned, it targets youth between the ages of 10 to 14 years old, because research shows that's really when adolescents start to perhaps experiment with substances. And so we are implementing that first with 6th graders, and then implementing a school-based curricula called Life Skills, where we're trying to get to all the 7th graders in the school, and then concurrently working on those community teams. And so we see that pretty much across all counties, but it might happen at different times because we like to meet people where they are, and some counties or communities might have a lot more programming. They might have an established drug coalition, for example, whereas others might just be starting to partner with other organizations and talk about the issue of substance and opioid abuse.
Gotcha.
Yeah, every county is different. Every community is different. So just like other states implement the program a little bit differently from community to community, we're definitely aware of doing the same.
Gotcha. So we're in the beginning stages of really rolling out in the communities. So how are you guys going about maybe recruiting participants, deciding who takes part in these programs and these projects across the state?
That's a great question. We were just chatting about that on the way here. The great thing about the Prosper program and the curriculum that Prosper uses is that anyone can participate. Okay. So any middle school students and their families, it does not matter if they would technically be high risk or whatever you want to call it. from what we understand, everyone can benefit from these types of programs. We also have heard from parents who've gone through the program before who've absolutely loved it, that they come back 3 years later when their 10-year-old turns 13. So any families are welcome to be a part of the program.
Just because the name is Strengthening Families program is not only for families that need extra support, like Gabby said, everyone can benefit from it.
Gotcha. So you've talked about this Prosper being used in other states. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that it has in the communities that it's being implemented in?
Absolutely. So the state that we've talked with most about the lessons learned and also their experience has been Pennsylvania. So Penn State University implemented this several years ago, but some of the long-term impacts are really seeing how adolescents perhaps you see less truancy in schools, you'll see less behavioral issues in the classrooms, you'll see youth graduate from their high school or vocational school, and then from the community side, you'll see a lot more coordination. So perhaps the health department is talking to the school more, who's talking to extension more, so a lot more collective impact going on, which leads to greater sustainability, not only with making sure Prosper keeps going, but some of the other things that states do. So perhaps it's like a county-wide campaign to shatter the myths about drugs and addiction. Perhaps it's maybe applying for another grant that may bring on more prevention work into the county. So it really just depends. Every community is different, and that's really the magic of a community team. It's like whatever we want to work on, Prosper is there to help support it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The evidence is there. It's kind of amazing. I think that it's impressive that the curriculum has been around for over 20 years, but that's helpful for us because we've learned that it really positively impacts youth and their families. There are statistics about young people who go through the program have a decreased sexually transmitted infection rate, definitely decreased substance abuse, decreased prescription misuse, increased self-esteem, increased grades, and there are even economic benefits. So the data's there, the data is awesome. And then just talking about community impact, we were also chatting on the way here about how families that go through the program love it. We hear time and time again that parents go home and have a better relationship with their young people. And I also know, having worked with middle school students, I've never raised one, but I've heard it's pretty hard. And so the parents say that they have just such a stronger relationship starting in middle school and then throughout all of high school, which is so amazing to me.
And just to add to that, I mean, we know the reason Strengthening Families program really hones in on 10 to 14-year-olds, like we mentioned, is research shows that's when youth start to perhaps experiment with substances. The idea is try to either prolong it or prevent it from even happening. And what I love about the program is there's a session in the curriculum itself that's all about how to handle peer pressure. And so it even has an acronym called STOP that it talks about the steps you go through when you encounter a situation, when you may feel pressured by a peer, and what steps you may go through to remediate that situation. Also, what does it mean to have a good friend? What is a good friend? What's not a good friend? So some lessons that we even wish some of us would have received when we were younger, you know, but it's excellent to start talking about that. And what's really neat about the program too is because we invite the parents or caregivers to it also, you begin the 2 to 2.5 hour long class with first sharing a meal together, which we know is so important in building social and emotional health within a family. And then we split up into youth and parents and caregivers. So they learn their own things. So for the first session, for example, is all about the youth will create treasure maps that are centered around their goals and aspirations. And then the adults learn about love and limits. And when they get together, the adults, parents or caregivers have to guess which poster is their child's, and then they have a conversation about it, and then we finish with a pledge. So it's really wholesome, it's really heartwarming to see it, and we just started started launching it in Hardin County and have gotten great feedback from families. So we're really excited to really jump into the rest of our counties.
That's great. So when the children are doing their map and they're working together, what sort of content is being presented to the adults and caregivers?
Yeah, so they'll have, I think the lesson's called Love and Limits, and so they talk about how you show love to your youth that you're taking care of. And the reason we call them parents or caregivers is because we want to be mindful of grandparents taking care of children. You know, especially we know with how hard substance abuse has hit the state of Ohio, that's often the case. So they'll talk about showing love, but also setting limits. So perhaps if you are with another caregiving unit in your home, how you get on the same page about things,
right.
You know, and being consistent with whatever, you know, consequences there might be with certain actions with the youth. So just about that, setting a standard in the home and being consistent with it. So and then at the end, they usually have a take-home message or homework, if you will,
sure.
where they have to work on something. So one homework assignment they receive within Strengthening Families program is to have a family meeting and what that looks like, how to structure a family meeting, what are the do's and don'ts, how to send ground rules. So again, something I think we all wish we could have had even in our own household.
Helpful for everyone, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more, that class, those topics sound great. Can you give us a little insight into maybe some other topics that are covered in these projects in the counties?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm blanking on
the peer pressure thing is huge.
Okay.
So I think the young people gaining those skills in preparation for inevitably facing peer pressure in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely one of the favorites. And then for the young people, there are also lessons where they actually develop their own language and practice role-playing with their peers, how they might respond in a peer pressure type of situation.
And I statements, right, with your parents. So this is kind of a therapy 101, but right, so how you express how you feel, but do it in a way that's not offensive. So saying, I felt, you know, offended when you said, you know, that you didn't believe in me or something, you know, and so being able to really capture your emotion in a constructed way that helps you progress as a family and do better.
That's great. So you're preparing these young people to make certain decisions, kind of work through these steps in life, but also teaching them how to engage maybe with the adults in their lives so that they can really make the best decisions possible.
Yeah.
Can you give us some insight into maybe what the timelines look like in the counties where these programs are rolled out? How long are they implemented? Those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the family-based program that we talk about is 7 weeks.
Okay.
So we typically look to do that in the springtime because, like I said, we like to try to have 6th graders engage in what we call SFP 10 to 14 for short before they enter 7th grade, where they'll get it's about a 18 lesson series that happens in the classroom. So we have a teacher deliver that, but they can also combine lessons. So it may look like a 12-week series. But so that typically happens in the fall. If a county or community chooses to implement Strengthening Families program 10 to 14 again in the fall, that's totally up to them. We like to have at least 8 to 10 families in on that. And then a couple other items of programming that we're doing that we didn't talk about yet is adult mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid, and also Generation RX, which actually Extension has been implementing across the state for some time now, which really made us well suited for Prosper programs, just because it really lays the groundwork in reducing the stigma around mental health, talking about not only with adults but also youth about how you manage what are prescription pain medicines, what do you look for, and what might some of the effects be of using those. So just again bringing the conversation to the forefront and not just burying it under to to unfortunately let youth discover on their own and then fall risk for harming themselves with.
That's great. So this program is a good start, but it sounds like we have a lot of other things kind of working around that really can support people through this tough time. What are some other takeaways that you want people to get about Prosper and the work that you guys are doing? Or maybe just something about your role, like your direct role with this program? Yeah.
I think that one thing that we kind of alluded to but didn't get too much into was the community team element.
Yeah.
So Prosper relies on these community teams, one per community, to really oversee the implementation of the system to fidelity. They also help with sustainability, and that's also where Extension's role comes in. So I'm working with a community catalyst at OSU Extension in Franklin County, and an extension educator at Central State University in Franklin County, and they are really kind of serving as the boots on the ground in the schools, gaining support, gaining interest so that we can get the program up and running. They're forming these teams of like-minded, passionate individuals to oversee the implementation and the sustainability. So that's a key part of the Prosper program, which I just wanted to kind of mention again because we kind of forgot to in the beginning. And then, of course, Karima also has 3 community teams across her 3 counties.
Yeah, and some specific activities that we encourage them to do is in terms of how to sustain the Prosper programs is like, some of the logistics, securing logistics like a location that the family program might be housed in, securing family meals, if there are any incentives involved. We all know that people like to have goodies when they come to programs and really commit their time to something. And if possible, perhaps even like offering some rewards to people who are actually facilitating the programs, which tend to be volunteers within the community. OSU trains them in the curriculum, so we incur the cost there, but really from then on it's really the facilitator's role and taking on and teaching it. So and then we hope to have like a summit soon, like in the second year that we've launched and hopefully expanded Prosper, where we can come together and talk about lessons learned. Throughout the year, we have we're going to start what are called learning communities, which is just every other month getting on a Zoom or an online call and talking about a topic. Maybe it's motivational interviewing, maybe we're talking about coaching, maybe we're talking about how to go after grants. So just some training opportunities for our community teams to give them the skills they need to sustain Prosper.
So with the work that you're doing in your community teams, obviously you're very familiar with Extension. You've been pretty involved in a lot of the different kinds of programming that we offer. Is there the opportunity to also work in these teams to promote and implement other kinds of programming, so like nutrition or financial wellness education for these youth too, that might help in some way kind of support the work that Prosper's doing? Or are those parts of the program themselves?
Yeah, that's an area that has yet to be explored actually, and I think it's actually well suited for that, because when we talk about building a resilient community and youth, preventing substance abuse and promoting healthy behaviors is just one component of it. So I think there's absolutely room to work with the same youth and becoming ambassadors, really promoting perhaps financial wellness within the school. Perhaps they become 4-H health heroes. There's a few youth-led prevention projects throughout the state that Prosper fits really well into as a component, but can certainly work in collaboration with some of the other extension programs.
That's great. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to learn more about Prosper or really any of the work that's being done by Extension and by this group to face the opioid epidemic, what would you recommend that they do? How should they go about finding this stuff out?
Okay. Well, we're actually in the process of launching our website, so you'll have, we'll probably flash it up on the screen here soon. We also have a Facebook page where we share some updates and highlights from what's going on in the community, but we'll also share our email address with anyone who wants to get in touch with us if this is something you want to see if your community is doing or you just want to become an advocate for. We absolutely encourage you to reach out to us. Yeah.
That's great. So if community members see this or they just hear about it, they're encouraged to maybe reach out to a member of your team, maybe a member of the team that's in their county, and see how they can get involved.
Yeah, we're prevention coordinators, so we're kind of that liaison between the community and the state team that does all the behind the scenes project management. We get to do the fun stuff. So yeah, absolutely reach out to us, and we love to connect you to
That's
folks.
great.
Yeah.
Especially if people were interested in being facilitators for the curriculum.
Gotcha.
Because that's a unique personality is needed to facilitate fun programming with young people.
Right.
But it's also an awesome opportunity because it's so fun to hang out with 13-year-olds, in my opinion. So
Yeah, that is definitely a fun age for sure.
So that would be if someone was particularly interested in that role, they could definitely get involved, and we could use the help.
Absolutely.
That's great. So we have a few minutes left. What are some other takeaways, some talking points, some key points about this program that you'd like to share with our viewers?
I mean, I always just go back to the public health and the prevention piece.
Right.
Because, and Karima talked about this earlier, that middle schoolers are at a really important time in their lives in terms of brain development, going through puberty. And it's also when, unfortunately, parent engagement drops off. So right around age 12, studies show that parent engagement, understandably, just completely goes down. So I think that a program like this for people at such a young age is just amazing. And from what we've heard of parents who've gone through it, I think there's something to be said for the fact that parents come back with all of their kids and go on to become facilitators themselves.
Absolutely.
And really, really advocate for this program, which is also why Ohio State chose to implement this particular program in the state.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this month for this episode of Healthy Living Resources. If you want to know more about Prosper, stay tuned. They're actually going to continue this conversation next month. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.